There's a lot of talk about how important food is to the health of our body, which is a vital topic. But what gets skimmed over quite a bit is the topic of water. So today's episode is going to talk about the water that we drink and how that profoundly impacts our health in a good way or a negative way. So stay tuned. Welcome back. My name is Sarah. I am known as Carnivore Yogi. Thank you so much for being here and clicking on today's video. Today, I have an interview with my friend, Jonathan Butts, who is the CEO of Natural Action Technologies. And we talk exclusively about water today. Yes, there's a little nutrition talk mixed in there because there always is with any conversation that I have. But we really do talk about how water influences the health of our body. What are good types of water? What are water scams? Alkaline water. What is a good way to purify your water? And so there's a lot in this conversation. There are a ton of timestamps down in the show notes for you guys because it is a very, very loaded conversation. So feel free to skip around through those. And check out Natural Action Technologies. I'm going to put a link down in the show notes for you guys. If you're interested in trying out any of their products, I have a discount code. It is SarahK-10 that you can check out. And for anything that is a little bit of a higher priced item, you can use SarahK-20 for a 20% discount. So make sure you check them out. Follow Jonathan's company. It's amazing. They do so many educational webinars, have so many amazing resources for you guys. And again, those timestamps are going to be your guide to getting through this episode and going back and listening to those pertinent things. So I have two sponsors of today's episode. The first one is going to be Viva Rays. These are my circadian glasses, which I absolutely love. One of the things that we talk about in this episode is how important circadian rhythms are to maintaining that water integrity in your body. So I have these glasses that I usually wear on the computer. Then there's a layer that you can put on after sunset. And then the third layer is before sunrise or after sunset to protect your circadian rhythms from that artificial light. You can use my code YOGI to save 15% on Viva Rays. And they are just amazing to help you keep your circadian rhythms intact, which is a huge part of your overall health. The second sponsor of today's show is going to be Optimal Carnivore. These are their grass-fed organ complex. You can use my code carnivore uppercase Y to save 10% on these. Unlike some other supplements, they don't have anything added to them. It is simply organ meats. There's nothing added to this, and it is a wonderful way to fill in those nutritional gaps if you need to, which a lot of people are not getting these essential nutrients, these B vitamins, the folate that are found exclusively in these organ meats. So again, carnivore uppercase Y will save you 10%. And I hope you guys enjoy today's episode. Please feel free to leave a comment or a like, and make sure to check out Jonathan over at Natural Action Technologies. I will talk with you again soon. All right, guys, welcome back. I am really excited to have today's guest with me. He is the CEO of Natural Action Tech and a board member. He's actually had several different careers, as we've just been talking before I turned this camera on, but he is what I consider definitely a water expert, an engineer. So Jonathan, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about you and how you actually became interested in water before we dive into some of the deeper topics.
I think for me, there was two pathways. One, I grew up on a river and always wanted to provide my own food. So really young, 7, 8 years old, I started fishing on a regular basis. And that was a more mysterious side of water. I think half of the time I just liked being on the water and in the water and the river, and if fishing was somewhat of an excuse, but it made it practical for me. Yeah. And further on, I think I was 24, so I already had a little bit of a nuclear power career and industrial water use, and that was more mechanical for me. I didn't really see water as a living entity in the pipes and in the pumps and all these systems. So I was 24 years old. After I got out of the military, I moved to Montana and kind of was living in the mountains. And when I first got there, I I was in a wilderness area and it was really hot, and the horses were really thirsty. So were we. Everybody was out of water. It was a longer ride than we thought up the mountain, and we hit a spring. And I got off the horse, and I remember the horse turned and went over towards the water, like without me leading him.
Wow.
He knew it was there. And I bent down and cupped the water and I started drinking it. Like the moment it hit my mouth, I remember seeing this huge horse eyeball. Like his eye got like really big, like right next to mine. And he was like communicating with me, like, yeah, this is real water. And like, you've never had it before. Like, it's almost like he could tell my response of, oh my goodness. And then I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm 24 years old and I've never had real water. That's kind of sad. And what does that mean for the other 7 billion people on the face of the earth? Because I know they're not going to be coming up to high altitude, but there's something about this water. So that was the first experience where I was like, wow. But then I never really took it, never knew what I was going to do with my future, all that stuff. So I stayed in industrial engineering and the family business that worked in the steel industry. They asked me to try and develop a new product because they started in 1983. So this would have been 2005, something like that. And I said, okay, I'll take a look at the processes and see what I can find. And at the same time, another group came to me and said, hey, you're good with automotive engines. There's this water technology that they say gives better fuel mileage and reduced emissions. Would you be willing to assess it? Let us know if it works before we invest in it. And it took me about 3 or 4 days, and I was blown away with the level that it worked, because on a hydrogen typical physics calculation, the separation of water, there was nothing there that would account for better gas mileage, meaning in an energy world, they say the electricity to split it apart is more than the energy you get back from it. And it's kind of true if you go to splitting it apart. But if you don't actually split it all the way apart, the water stays whole and it's in a gas form. And so you just bleed the vapor into the engine. And what it does is change the behavior of the fuel. And so right away, like I was able to get double gas mileage in the vehicle. And right away, I was like, the automotive industry is terrible for a career of making money, and the politics with fuel mileage. I knew well enough on that. So I put it in the laboratory and started studying this visible, because you can ignite water when it's really charged, but it behaves more like a laser, more like, and it has some level of intelligence, and you can see all this. And it's cold fusion too, and it's implosion is the big thing here. Nobody was really taught. If you look at kind of the magic side of the programming and the teaching, nobody coming up through school was ever taught implosion, which is the art of bringing things together. We were all taught separation and explosion. So no human mind in the normal education system even considers implosion as a way to process or change energies or become more efficient, if you will. So nonetheless, we went into industrial scale development, some bigger stuff, and there was algorithms and mutations going on in the water that you could watch if you were watching the vibrations. And so I was like, why is it moving around? Why is it changing? What is changing? And I didn't study water, didn't have any formal history with it other than normal mechanical engineering stuff, right? Phase change, they kind of saturate everything in the engineering world to where the water's stuffed. It can't do anything. It can't breathe. And then it just behaves the same, more mechanical. So it's almost like our knowledge base or our engineering teachings taught us to force water into a condition that we said it was, which it's just a chemical. It's just a chemical. There's nothing else going on here. It behaves like this. But we all know like water has the most anomalies out of any substance on the face of the earth. It expands as it's freezing. There's all these weird things going on that nobody seems that curious about at this time, right?
Right.
So I open up the can of worms there, and I decide that water has measurable, observable intelligence, and it maybe not be a human, interpretation of intelligence, but it's making decisions and it knows how to do things that we can't explain. And there's direct evidence. So as that knowledge and development went on, I switched over to working with natural action right at its conception, which is about 2010. And the energy stuff's a lot more political. So I was like, hey, well, I'll just go into the health world and the agricultural world. They're all connected, right? Good soil yields good fruit, yields medicine for the body as well as energy, right? And I think that's what we've lost is the food and the water. And when you couple all this, it should be your medicine. I mean, Paracelsus said, let the food be thy medicine, right? The difference between a poison and medicine is only the dose. And that's a good one for people. Like everybody has uranium in their body, every one of us. And we have the whole universe atomically in our body. And if you took that little bit of uranium out, something would probably start to malfunction in the body. But you put too much uranium in the body then it's a problem, right?
Right.
So some stuff is really small and water is really big in that equation, right? So aging is directly correlated to the amount of water in your body, right? So as a baby holds a way higher percentage as they're growing, and then as you mature fully, it starts to gradually decay. So it's more necessary to engage in these means. So long story short, I really more shifted to liquid water and health of the soil first. And so we did a lot of research farms, and living soil and living water was part of that equation. And then I had my health crisis. So as a forced to address water and health in the human body, like you said. So I got a root canal and became like a type 1 diabetic overnight.
Oh, wow.
And you're totally dehydrated as a type 1 diabetic. And no matter how much water you drink, your body's not going to hydrate because it has to do with proteins, and in a relationship with proteins are used to regenerate cells and flesh, and water has instruction there. And so it's not like you just drink more water all of a sudden of any type, and there's different types of water, right? So, if you're falling acid because you're a type 1 diabetic, then alkaline water may be of assistance of slowing the metabolism down, because if type 1's like hypermetabolism, so you just burn your body up, basically oxidize, your blood turns dark red. It's pretty crazy. And so that brought that on, and it's kind of full circle between the health of the planet, the health of the soil, our mindset and how we view that, and being regenerative. Everybody talks sustainable. Well, who wants to struggle just to barely keep your head above water? The fact is, nature will regenerate, and so will your body.
Yes.
When you hit on these points, which you obviously have gone pretty deep into.
Yeah, I've tried to, and I really want my audience to understand, just this basic concept of water in the body. And I was listening to a lecture from one of my teachers, actually, just before we got on the call, just the beginning of it. And one of the things he said was, if we don't understand the mitochondria and the relationship to mitochondria making water in our health, and the only thing we focus on is mechanism like genetics, like let's look at your DNA and let's look at this. And we don't look at how the mitochondria is making water. Anybody who's just focused on just DNA, and let's give you supplements to help you fix your, he's like, don't listen to them. It's a dead end because you can actually change I mean, it was like, he's saying Doug Wallace. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He's one of the top mitochondrial researchers in the country. Doug Wallace is big on saying you can actually influence epigenetics through changing the water network in your body. Would you agree with that?
100%. And there's levels of it that would never end in your lifetime, as far as building that relationship and getting it to work. And like any relationship, it takes time. I'm not a big meditator, but I can tell you, if you meditate with water and use a little cheater tool, you can move the water around and get it to do things in ways that has no explanation. It's just mind blowing. And honestly, there were some big problems which relate to the mitochondria, now that you brought it up. So, in Basically, if we don't overstrain the water and don't over separate it, you get this new form of water which behaves electrically.
Mhm.
Okay. And so this is done in an electrolysis situation or capacity, if you will. Now, when you look at what they call the ETCs in the mitochondria,
Mhm.
it's basically round electrolyzers. And so there's layers of polarity change from plus minus, plus minus, plus minus, like a China doll, like a circle inside of a circle inside of a circle, right? And there's these mechanisms in there that basically you have the Krebs cycle going on, and it's I'll note that Krebs said this, but they never published it. So Krebs kind of got buried by the institutional understanding, because what occurs at the very end of the ETC channels.
Electron transport chain, for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about.
Sorry, yeah, acronyms,
okay.
right? And more or less recombination of water. So newborn water occurs, as well as the ATP cycle that builds heat. So they teach you about burning sugar and building heat. Well, that's just to kind of keep everything in stasis. That's a little bit of energy. I can assure you that the recombination of water from this process of what they would call Brown's gas, or what I call water plasma, has a lot of different states, a lot of mutation, intelligence, memory, and more or less, I didn't make any ground with development. So what would happen is, if we took normal electrodynamics and charged the water to make this plasma gas, which is a useful, it's good in medicine too. George Wiseman, that's kind of a cool angle to check out, because he's kind of focused on the medicine route. You can breathe this gas. So it is a water gas, a highly charged water gas. And when you ignite it, it implodes, it doesn't explode. So we have the first substance you can view in steady state that's in a state of implosion. And we can learn about what implosion is, or integration rather than separation, in the physics, right? So big step there and what's going on. And then we hit that topic again at the end of the ETCs, because we're recombining water. That's implosion. And so people say the water amount never changes. Well, it does all the time, because hydrogen and oxygen separate and recombine all the time in nature. And hydrogen alone behaves nothing like water, and oxygen alone behaves nothing like water. So we have this new element, right? Forget that we know these atoms or anything is going on. So at the end of every mitochondria, and a lot of people don't know this, but there's hundreds of thousands of them in your cells. Like people remember when they go, look, here's the diagram of a cell, and here's a mitochondria. So you're thinking like, oh, there's one mitochondria in there, and it's like the powerhouse of the cell. No, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And so when you overcharge, like overeat calories, let's not even talk about the quality of the carbohydrate or the protein or the fat yet. Let's just talk about sheer energy. You're pretty complacent with life, and you're not very active, and you're eating 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day, which isn't hard to do at all.
Right.
And what you do is you overload the water in the mitochondria, and normally it will expel electrons out into the cell and cause apoptosis, or cell death. And that's supposed to happen. But if the regeneration is screwed up because you're overcharging the water in the cells with too much energy, too much to burn, how are you going to regenerate if you got a death signal going on? And here you start to get into cancer. The cells aren't killing themselves anymore. They're staying alive for a really long time. Now your metabolism has really dropped, because it's just staying in it. This defunct cell is just cruising around now. And then there's some interesting things with water and cancer that may come up later that are kind of cool, that not many people are talking about, which has to do with the understanding of the more noxious side of cancer, or the side that actually damages you, versus the debate, whether it's this or that or the other thing. And, rapid cell growth with no nucleus, right, is where you start to end up. So now we're back at the beginning of time, where you have a single cell organism with no nucleus, no mitochondria, not much of anything. And it's basically yeast, and colonizes as fungus, and can be beneficial or not. And in the case for us, like cancer is an unbeneficial rooted network of single cell organisms. So it's basically a fungal infection, right? It's becoming dominant. And so that all comes and starts from, I'm not saying the water is responsible for it or we're responsible for it directly. Without an understanding, we wouldn't know. But basically, overeating calories and inactivity is the start of the cause of cancer. And everybody's got a bit of it in their body. There's nothing to be afraid of. You know, you just have to keep it all. It's just like candida. It's supposed to be in your body, but if it crawls up into your stomach, you're in bad shape, you know, at that point. So that's kind of a lesson in the mitochondria side, because that is the root of regeneration. So the biggest ground I've ever made treating animals and myself, that's all I really do, is what you call mitochondrial regeneration programs. D-ribose, certain types of, amino acids, creatine, anything that can give your body more storage for energy while you wean off the calories, right? Because you're stuck on those calories because you're feeding the critters in your gut.
Yes, absolutely.
They're hungry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like if you found out 2/3 of what you eat is going to them and they keep wanting more and more and more, then they eat your gut liner out, you burn up, right? Now you have leaky gut. Now you overload your liver, kidneys are next, gall system plugs up. So there's a lot of guys out there who pointed this out. And what I like about the mitochondria and the water's role in that inside of the cell is basically, if you you can't just drink water right off the bat, maybe you'll get an improvement, but if you don't give the nutrients, these cells won't regrow correctly. And they'll literally start epigenetically modifying themselves like within a few months, compared to like the 30 years it took you to screw your whole epigenetic up with junk food and junk water, pretty empty type stuff. So I couldn't agree more that understanding water and the mitochondria are like the place to start. And the people who I know who do best with all illness fast. They just drink water and they put mineral and then wash with water, and they know this cycle. So it might be, I would say, fresh steam distilled water is the best flusher. And so whether you're using lemon water or like who's Stanley, the guy who does the master cleanse.
Oh yeah. I've done
Stanley somebody.
It's the worst. I hate that thing.
Stanley Burroughs. Yeah,
I can't remember. Yeah,
I've like never done it.
Maple syrup and cayenne pepper.
And then lemon.
Yeah.
Right, because that's got the mineral. It's got the acid that helps your digestion, and then when the acids burn out, it leaves by alkaline. And so you salt in the blood really good for removing toxins. And I've never done it because I like what's the reality pathway for normal human beings, and what's the simplest, right? So in the end, it's kind of like water, mineral, and deliver, and water, flush out, and then eat as little as possible, the most nutrient dense stuff. And that'll get you going in the right direction.
Yeah, I've done master cleanse before, but I've also done like a 7-day water fast. I've done 72s, 48s. Water fasting is about 10 times easier than doing the master cleanse. And I think it's because they have you put in the maple syrup. So you never really get into a super deep state of ketosis. You keep throwing yourself out. And so you don't have that clean, energy system going. You're just constantly like adding the glucose in there. And so you might get to start to go into ketosis. And then, so anytime I've done master cleanse, and this was like before I even knew anything about water fasting or just benefits of it, I intuitively, by the end of it, the last probably 3 days, because it's a 10-day thing, the last 3 days, intuitively, I would just kind of stop drinking as much as I was supposed to of that formula. I was just like, I can't, like, just intuitively I had stopped doing it. I didn't realize it until I had gotten really a little bit more educated about fasting years later that, I would just be, putting the glucose back into my system and causing me to feel worse and worse. And if I just took that piece out, it's a lot easier to complete
most people I know have said somewhat the same thing. They really don't. They might do the lemon water and distilled water flush, but they don't add all that other stuff. So it's tough too. You got to be like pretty you got to know what you're doing a little bit with fasting.
Oh,
So it's
yeah.
not really for your average person. You know what I mean?
No.
Yeah. If your liver doesn't start to produce proteins, which a lot of people who are sick have a bad liver.
Yes.
So at day 5, your proteins will go to 0. And if they don't bounce back up, you'll hurt yourself fasting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so some people do really well, other people's don't. I think I found the mechanism for that your liver needs to generate its own proteins at that point to heal.
Okay.
And if it can't, you shouldn't be fasting. You have to heal the liver first. So there's all sorts of different angles on these methods.
Yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying today's episode with Jonathan. Again, reminder to head down to the show notes to follow him, to understand more of his work. And if you want to check out any of those products, those are also linked down there as well. I wanted to pause to thank one more sponsor today, Upgraded Formulas. Now we get into the topic of minerals and how depleted our soil is, how depleted our water typically is of those minerals today in this episode. One way to know if your body is mineral deficient is the hair tissue mineral analysis from Upgraded Formulas. You can use my code YOGI12 or YOGI to save on that. And I always recommend getting a consultation with that so that you can actually understand and read those results. Upgraded Formulas has an amazing hair tissue mineral analysis with a consultation again. So from the comfort of your own home, you can find out what your particular mineral status is, and you don't have to guess when adding minerals back into your water, when trying to be mindful of the minerals that you're eating in your food. That is my go-to source for measuring that mineral balance within the body. It's much more accurate than a blood test because it's going to show 60 to 90 days versus just a snapshot in time, which is what a blood test will show. So thanks again to Upgraded Formulas for sponsoring today's episode. Let's jump back in.
But I think the whole thing works when you gradually, I think reduced calorie is huge for the mitochondria.
Yeah, I think so.
Keeping your pH balance in the body and knowing what that means. And then the type of water you're drinking and the type of mineral is probably. So when I travel around the country and look at soil, it's dead in most places and it has common problems, right? And so does the human body.
Yes.
And so the mineral delivery and the more magical ones seem to be from volcanic areas. I can say that right off the bat, that everywhere I've ever been in the world, the trace minerals, like when it comes in like 80, 90, like let's just talk regular blue-green spirulina algae, and that as a supplement versus AFA from Klamath Falls. And why is there like people from all over the world, like it's like the most competitive body of water for harvesting. And it's so rare, but it's because the water is unique there from the volcano that blew up.
Interesting.
And it didn't blow, it like cauldroned itself. So when it finally blew up, it blew up trace minerals all over the whole region. And so Oregon wines are exceptional because of the mineral that's in the soil. It didn't make it down to California. The wind must have been blowing north because the California wines are depleted and we don't see that there. And so we sell a mineral supplement that is the way oceans clean up their floors with the plumes. So the sulfur coming out of the plumes is actually binding and neutralizing all the toxins from all the rivers and the sky and everything, and making it food for the, flora and fauna on the ocean floor that set up the whole plankton all the way up to the whales. And so that's how nature works, like another volcanic, example. But if you go take that same chemical substance, like a black mica from a mountain, you don't see it. It's not there. And so amazing things come out of these volcanic minerals. Same thing with, some of the stuff over in Russia where the craters hit and fuse things. You see these, but we analyze it chemically and we're like, oh yeah, it's got magnesium, it's got calcium, we say it's all the same. So in my opinion, what water is doing by changing its form and changing its behavior is teaching us that transmutation and adaptation and regeneration are all part of a natural cycle. And so you're not stuck with this stuff. It's not permanent.
Yeah.
We can change all of it. And if we all start with ourselves,
exactly,
that's the best way to change the collective.
Exactly. I agree. What are your thoughts on something like Quinton minerals? Do you like those?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's another natural uh scenario where,
Yeah.
if it's not overused,
Yeah.
everything comes down to overuse or underuse. Some people
Yeah.
are like, oh, I didn't know you could drink seawater. It doesn't really
Yeah.
harm you.
People
And I'm
have
like,
gotten,
you can supplement with seawater mineral, but you don't want to be drinking seawater every day. That's
you don't want to do it
ridiculous.
straight. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the agriculture, C90, I forget the guys' names. I'm terrible with the names, but there's a history of like feeding plants foliar and even the soil with seawater,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just a little bit of it, and it goes a long
Yep.
way. And it's because of all the trace minerals in the seawater.
Yep.
And if I could give advice to anybody, that's the one major thing. If you want to fix crops, if you want to fix your blood, take a
Yes.
wide band micronutrient and the water structure. This is what's super cool about the science. So the living water actually changes the shape. So look at it like a key,
Mm-hmm.
of all these minerals. And so you can take a bunch of potassium. If it's synthetically heat processed, your body won't take it up. So you
Got
see
it.
all these heat processes deform proteins and minerals to the point where your body's like, what's this? I
Yep.
don't know what this is.
Yep.
And if your body doesn't have a lot of extra energy, it won't convert it. When you're younger and you're full of life force and you're growing, your body will change this stuff. If you're
Uh,
drinking dead water all the time and your
yep.
blood starts to become dead, that dead blood and dead water don't have any interest in changing these elements to make them
Mhm.
available. So those are most of the tests we run are really simple with structured water. We'll like structure orange juice and then not, and then look at the difference between the two. And the unstructured orange juice, like synthetic absorbic
Mhm.
acid preservative, comes out like plastic and it's stuck to the beakers and it's dark
Oh,
dark
wow.
brown, almost black. And the other one like crumbles into dust and is like a light tan, just letting it
Wow.
evaporate. So we see that milk, like you structure milk and one will rot way faster than the other one if you leave it out on the counter. So,
Ah.
and then there's pictures under the microscope. Nobody really understands this stuff. Everybody goes a moto, and I'm like,
Yeah, exactly.
not really. But there is something going on there with what Emoto was seeing and doing. But this is real hardcore consistent. And in particular, the work of Andreas Schultz, he went
Mm.
all over the globe and did samples. And when he found right angle patterns in the crystal structure under the microscope, the water was considered to be dormant or dead. And if it had toxins in it, it would not bind those toxins, it would deliver them to your body. However, every river that hasn't been polluted has a different structure. And then they went on to find it in the blood. So everybody who was chronically ill had a right angle crystalline pattern in their blood. And so one of the ways structured water kind of got infamous for helping with chronic illness is you're actually putting living, like a transfusion, you're replacing the dead water in your
Yes.
body. And it's got a
Yes.
memory, it's got a program. So it wants to go back. Because I think you have to realize that you're only alive because the body's and the water in it is very adaptable. And that's
Yes.
how you made it as far as you did. But to go back, you're going to have to rewrite the software.
Yeah.
And one way you do that is with living water and minerals. That's
Yes.
one of the best ways, in my opinion. If you're
So I feel
missing
it,
that, it's hard.
it definitely, I agree. And that's one thing I feel like I want to explain a little bit to my audience is the different, like, because you say dead water, I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But I don't know that a lot of people truly understand like what dead water is
Uh,
exactly.
well, let's and I like to use the term dormant because you can
Mhm.
actually wake the water up very quickly again.
Yes.
And if you look, and so I'll simplify, what causes the water to rescind from its abilities or go dormant is
Hmm.
constant stress,
Hmm.
right? So we're moving our water around in straight pipes. It doesn't take a lot to look at nature and go, where does nature move water around in straight lines? Nowhere.
Nowhere.
And
Yeah.
where are we spinning the water in the straight pipes? We're not.
Nope.
So there's this common sense thing of the way nature does this is not the way we're doing it, right? And on top of it, you're under pressure. So the center of the water, what we would call the younger part of the water in the center, the way it's historically taught, is just being squeezed to death constantly. And so it's just like a human being. And it may be actually the water in the body that's reflecting this, is if you are not enjoying life and you are not free to move and you are stressed day in and day out and you are not exposed to the normal journey, right? Being able to walk, being able to run. This is health we're talking about. Like when I was in my health crisis, like walking it took a lot of effort. I had to get up and get a glass of water, and it was like, all right, I got to get prepared for this marathon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here I go. I'm going to get up. And it's like, wow, like you want to talk about real world example of losing your freedom. It's the worst way to do that is with your health. Like,
yeah, it is
it's really bad. So that's what we're talking about, is water that has been overstressed has a memory of that stress, and it takes on a pattern of it can't morph anymore. It just kind of like goes into its shell.
Yeah,
is the way I would put it.
So
and it's not hard to get water out of that shell, but it's not like it's an on-off equation. That's what I struggle with. Most people go, well, is it structured or is it not? And I'm like, well, there's a degree of it. Right. And so we can undo the on-off part, that this water is qualified alive. So in the science, I've spent most of the discoveries we didn't do at all. I think I had an understanding of it to recognize different bodies of work. So what we do is document the science that adds up to how do you define living water? And that became very articulate in recent times where, okay, water is actually growing solid cells out of itself. And that was the double helix work in the United States. David Gahn and Alpha Low is the son. So they have pictures of 100 nanometer cells of water, right? In pairs. And so pure water, ultra pure water, you take a really powerful atomic force microscope and you look and you can see 100 nanometer dots that get together, and then they assemble everything, simulating all of biology, double helixes, red blood cells, bacteria. And it's been correlated with the immune system and naturally produced along your spiral column, the Germans call it. Because that's where your integrative energy center is that really charges the water in your body. And you'll hear about, people needed to do spinal taps for certain things or extractions for healing and other ways, And so that starts off this idea that if water's the type of energy that's fed into the water from the universe is integrative, the water just changes its whole game plan. It's like, oh, okay, now we're not a break anymore. Now we're going to grow things. And where the real function of water, once it goes dormant, is just to stop growth. It has a value. It has a purpose. Same thing with alkaline water is the brakes on a race car. So everybody gets over infatuated with, I'm like, you're sitting on the starting line with the brakes on and you're going to stay there. And the accelerator is basically your acid. But the balance between those two right around neutral is where nature works. You get much above 8 or 9 and much below 5, you're in trouble. You know, in either of those states, you're in trouble. So
I've always thought alkaline water was kind of just a ridiculous concept. It's not just a marketing concept, right?
Completely. Because I'm like, oh, I can take sodium hydroxide and make alkaline water and drink it. It'll poison you to death.
Exactly.
So if alkaline water has a wide band trace mineral delivery, your body don't care about that little extra pH or breaks. It's looking for the quality of mineral in that water. It does not really care what the pH is unless it's extreme. And even that, like for stomach and the gut, like especially your stomach,
it's
like
to be acidic, right?
Like that's why the humic and the fulvics work really good, is because they help your digestion, and the sulfur base works. So the alkaline, I've seen people do damage to themselves with the alkaline pretty bad,
And, absolutely.
Vitamin D3, doctors are prescribing that.
Oh, God, don't get me started.
That like you overdose on that and you'll plug your system up completely and bloat. So people
Oh,
go, I
yeah.
take a bunch of vitamin D3. I go, yeah, you got high mouth pH, bad enzymes, your liver's slow now. So you're plugged up,
Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
plugged up, you know?
It's like people don't understand these, hormones and things like vitamin D and vitamin A and vitamin, the fat soluble vitamins. They work in conjunction with one another. You're going to throw one of them if you eat a bunch of, beef liver, pounds of beef liver, that's going to cause an issue. Just like if you take a bunch of vitamin D, that's going to cause an issue. Nature doesn't work that way, just like you don't take a ton of potassium supplement. Like, then what are you doing with your sodium? It's like so many different things in the body work synergistically.
Yep.
You don't take a zinc supplement because then what are you doing to your copper levels? And it's
Well, yeah. Well, and I think you said it, like how you got onto it. And it was the same thing with me and discovering the mysteries of water and unlocking it. For there was more intuition than anything.
Yes. Yeah.
And you just listen to your body, when I went into the doctor, when I got that root canal, and 3 days later, I was literally like, my liver just broke.
Wow.
And they were like, oh no, you got high blood sugar. I'm like, yeah, I know. And they were, and they said, well, how do you know your liver broke? I'm like, the same way, your hand just got hit with a hammer, only it wasn't painful. It was just like, my liver was like, hey, I'm done. And there was an instant change in my physiology, my feeling. Like, it was a moment where my liver switched from, all right, I'm not working overtime anymore.
Wow.
Your pancreas was probably never strong. That was a weak spot in our family. And the infection and the vaccines, right? They all went and attacked the pancreas because that was the weak spot. And other people, it's the liver, and other people, it's the lungs, and other people, it's the stomach, right? Everybody. So you intuitively have to know your weak spots and work with them to strengthen them, right? So in the end, and what I'm seeing, and this is cool, is all the fancy words, all the deep science. It's all very basic energy flow. And if you overdo one side of the teeter-totter and not the other, you just end up with the teeter-totter stuck on the ground.
Yeah.
Right. And
exactly.
In reality, the teeter-totter should be rotating on a pivot, and the pivot should be moving, and it's barely wobbling. And that's what you would see in the chemistry of a healthy person.
Yeah.
And the water, in my opinion, helps buffer that equation. It will switch. If it needs to go more acid, the hydrogen will come out and become more acid. So it'll switch. Does the same thing with plants. Nature just kind of balances itself out as long as you don't overdo it. And too much of a good thing, right? Kind of.
Yeah.
And I kind of have that disease where, like, something works and then I just bury it. And then I'm like, ooh, I think I found the limit.
Exactly. I mean, I did that with fasting. I mean, I definitely overstressed my body with fasting. When I did that 7-day fast, I actually ended up getting really sick at the end of it. Because I think it was too much detox at one time, and my body was like, what? And I ended up I remember when I broke my fast, I was sick for about a week after that. I got a sore throat. I was throwing up. I felt nauseous. I felt terrible.
Kind of like what they call that, a Herx reaction.
Herxheimer. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like, I'm the same way. It's like, if a little bit is good, then a lot must be way better. But nature works on this bell curve,
Yes.
Like, the sun is good. I love the sun. I don't wear sunscreen. I'm like big on just safe sun exposure, making sure you're doing sunrise and all that stuff. But you don't want to lay out in the sun naked for 6 hours. If you're my complexion, it's just not a good idea.
Oh yeah. And it's like the night, everybody, then the night doesn't, well, if you didn't have night, like, the sun would be brutal.
Right.
So there's this process of cooling down and heating up.
Yeah,
And
body
it's that
temperature
simple.
goes up and down.
Yeah, it's that simple. Like, the whole physics is based on temperature and whether the atoms are cooling or heating up. And if they're heating up, they're banging into each other, and they're separating. If they're cooling down, they're coming together and tightening up their spin. And water has this overlap. So there's like this, male female combination going on there. That's a beautiful natural balance that we can learn a lot from. And we're in that phase. We spend more time educating people with the company than anything. And I'm big on, I can't stand the short circuit marketing. I'm more of a loyal natural observer and all this Alkaline and all this. You see it with all these companies, and a lot of them have good products, but when you market like down a mono road, eventually it's going to come back on you. Where why'd you market BS to sell more stuff when now science knows that what you were saying wasn't the real reason that it worked?
Right.
And I'm kind of like one of them guys that likes to work with everybody.
Yeah.
You know, everybody else is going, oh no, their stuff sucks and my stuff's better. And I'm like, we don't have the tools to even make those statements yet.
Right.
And everybody's different. So like,
yeah.
We use an electronegative, which means the substance likes to pull inward. So if it comes in contact with something else, it likes to pull inward, kind of hog it, if you will, a little bit, or integrate it. And then the electropositive substances basically push everything out. So if you take a structuring device with wine and you use an electronegative, it'll soften the wine curve and smooth it out. If you use electropositive, it'll blow out the flavors and make them bolder.
Okay.
And metals tend to be electropositive. So anybody uses metal devices, which I'm sensitive to. It's weird. I worked in the metal industry my whole life, and I do not like drinking water out of a metal container. Somebody puts the water in a metal pitcher, I'm like, I don't want it.
Yeah.
And they're like, why? I'm like, it makes the water like really harsh for me.
Yeah.
Like it's got, I may be too metal poisoned to take any more of that signature. I don't know,
Yeah.
And I like the smoother. I'm a big fan of smoother, smoothing things out, making more gradual, more comfort in the situation, which I think growing up, I was kind of a rough cat because I worked in real rough environments. And as I got older and I had that health crisis, I'm like, no, I need to give this body and this brain a break.
Yeah.
And that's what I prefer now. I can't say that's what it would have been in the past. So, getting intuitive with yourself, I think, is something that water really, really helps with. When you start paying attention to the simple fact of what the earth is. It's a big ball of water and we're flying through space. It's a spaceship. We don't feel the G forces, right? Just if we calculate the sun, we're moving at 10,000 miles an hour around a circle, right? None of us feel it. So they go, oh, the pilots can't handle the G's after it gets so fast. I'm like, well, we're all handling it right now. Nobody feels a single G. So what is the earth? How does that spaceship work? And it's a big ball of water.
Yeah,
so
it is. And so are we. And, I feel like something I say often is the further away we get from nature, the sicker that we get. And the one thing that you mentioned in the beginning that got you interested in water was drinking this water out of a spring, this like amazing living water. And most people have no access to that. So let's talk a little bit of,
That's what was sweet for me is back then I didn't know, I was a nuclear mechanical engineer. Yes, we dealt with water, but nothing. Right. And then it was about 10. So that, 12 years ago, 13 years, like I said earlier, maybe before it was recorded, I never stay with stuff that long. But once I locked into water was something out of divine territory to me, like in your face to me. It was a cool full circle because part of what we do with structuring water is lift the stress out of the water. So it does behave more like that mountain stream that I drank when I was 24. And I was kind of like, well, I'm going to live in the mountains. And I definitely was a healthy person living in the mountains.
Yeah.
And felt like it healed me of, working around nuclear power plants and metal poisoning and all the stuff that I did. Very hands-on learning type person. And so for me to be able to deliver and manufacture technology that at least starts heading back towards that mountain stream to everybody's home was a super cool full circle. If I only knew in that moment, right? When I was 24 years old, I had no idea. So it was I was probably in my mid 30s before I really was like, hey, this has huge health implications and huge spiritual implications. And it goes beyond the, the kind of left to right duality, way beyond it. So it's been an honor to kind of share the knowledge. And I'll say this, like, I've had a lot of training and I've done a lot of complicated stuff and people are like, boy, you're smart. But all my discoveries in water were gifts. They weren't I was used to plowing through things and fighting my way through it to get the answer. And I couldn't get anywhere with water like that. And it was so big that we were doing industrial development and I was failing because the water wouldn't run 24 hours a day. It was kind of like your mitochondria.
Yeah.
At some point, it would just shit out all the electrical exons and shut itself down. That's what it would do. And so I'm like, now we need 3 machines to run 24 hours because we have to rest these. And then I found out if you overloaded it, it needed 24 to 25 hours of rest. Now there's some things in the Ayurvedic that talk about the body scanning itself every 25 hours. It's not 24, it's off beat. It's 24, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you get the circadian cycle of changing all the time, like the tide. The tide is not 12-12.
Right.
The tides rotate, and so it's every hour on the clock gets high tide at some point, right?
Yeah.
So you see it circling through these different, like what we would call nodes, like your organs have different times. The earth has different times. Yes. And I know you understand all that really well because it's part of what you use to help heal yourself for sure.
Yes, exactly.
You wouldn't have mentioned it. So they were gifts. And at some point I'm like, wow, for me to discover this way, like literally, like I tripped and I was disgusted, stressed out, overloaded, getting taught by water, but yet beating myself up trying to force the water around. And then I would hit the wrong button on accident and something would happen and it would teach me what was wrong. And so these were more gifts. So it kind of became a thing for me to share what I had learned. And it's experience for me. So it's hard to share because if you don't really experience it, you don't know.
Exactly. It is.
And so that's where we're at. And I hear a lot of stories with the water, and I'm not big on, there's a lot of people in the structured water community or the water revitalization. We actually try and depart from the word structured water a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, because marketing, because structure, like everything has structure. What does that mean?
There's so many different things. I think people are really confused about what the heck structured water actually is. How do they structure their water? Like what's, can we maybe dive into that just a little bit?
Without getting too technical, we have a member site. And so we have a lot of educational material. And then on the main site, you kind of get a general overview and we got some good educational videos on there. But so, and then there's, I think it's what is structured water, about water quality. About water quality is on that what is structured water tab on our header. And I spent time addressing all the marketing stuff, like structured water, hexagonal water.
Yes.
So I'll just gonna really condense. Structured water is an ambiguous term invented by marketing people to oversimplify the change in state of water from A to B, and A to B has different behavior. All right. And then we get water revitalization. Now that's a whole different term. This means the water has taken on a living state. And how do we recognize that living state? Well, scientifically, there's a handful of things. There's different scans. There's Carillion photography that shows some changes. But basically, I found any one of these scientific measuring angles, like I would go, oh, this water didn't change here, so therefore it's not structured. But then I would measure its performance in the real world and it would do better. So I was like, any one of these don't describe the state of water. It's kind of like if you had a room with a few, what do they call, like peepholes, and you can kind of look to the center, but all you can see is one side of what's in the center. Until you walk all the way around the clock and look through all the peepholes, you can't really describe the topic in the center. And so I departed from science a little bit and started looking at application work. And so in the end, the biggest thing we use is UV spectroscopy. Doesn't pop where Gerald Pollack says it does at 270. It pops at 200. And there's a little bit going on at 270. And I've worked with and looked at the work of scientists all over. Now there is a little bit of a signature at 270, but we're looking at the whole body of water, not just like this crystalline outside.
Yeah.
So to summarize, hexagonal water is probably the eggshell around the water, which is also probably the exclusion zone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe in any H3O2 at all, because that's a breakdown of a much bigger conglomerate, which is addressed by the guy who wrote the hexagonal water book, which is Mushikun, if I pronounce that correctly.
Yeah.
And he was kind of,
I do.
he was the precursor to the kind of Kangen people.
Okay.
Like, so he did all this research to try and find out why that Kangen water worked. Well, the Kangen water is basically the same as a water plasma generator. And the reason why it works is because you're generating water plasma out of the center, the balance point between this extreme left and this extreme right.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the end, those are all mostly marketing terms unless they're tied to behavior. So structured water is just ambiguous. What it implies is there's a higher degree of structuring in the water. And there's, basically crystallography under the microscope that shows that. And it's not that difficult. And people who use flow forms and are onto the right materials, all do a fairly good job of structuring water. So with, there might be 6 or 8 or 10 worldwide that do this, and they all fight with each other about whose is better. And I'm like, they all work.
Yeah.
Some work better than others. But the cool thing is human beings have a signature. Hold on a second. Sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Maybe out in the and out there, I stole somebody's.
That's okay.
I stole somebody's keys.
Oh.
So, the full measure of it is we do have science to indicate that the water is living, and there are degrees of that. And you can overdo that, like you said. So we have a unit that we make that really, like, you put the water in it, and it's like an orgone accumulator and a radiation shield, and it's got shungite and magnetic field arrays and all this stuff. And it's a little bit more technical and still natural, but you put the water in it, you leave it in there in a refrigerator overnight, and it charges all night. And it makes a lot of structure in the water that appears to be the living cells that the water grows out of itself. And I mean, there is nothing but H2O in the water, and at room temperature, it makes cells that are identifiable and measurable. And they continue to get together and make all sorts of structures. And there's no instruction. Nobody's vibrating on this, telling the water to shape this way. It's not cymatics. Like cymatics is we put this vibration on it and the water makes a hexagon pattern or a dodeca pattern or whatever, right? Because we're vibrating and we change the vibration, it changes its shape. This is water doing it on its own, 100%. And it's not like predictable.
Yeah.
Nobody knows why it's making all the shapes or what it's doing. We know it has an immune function to it. And so in the early testing, I was like, hey, this water gets weird after 24 hours. Like it starts going the other way, and I actually measured it where it built up structure and now it's tearing down the structure. And I'm like, everything cycles, everything breathes. Right. And so I told the first users, because when we make new product, we try it on people in a more control, right? We just don't put a product out to the general public.
Right.
Tested it for a long time. And I told them, I go, don't abuse this. This is more medicine water. Don't abuse it and you'll be fine. I've abused it and it's too much detox. It's not fun. You'll get a sore throat. Your nose will start running. You're going to be pushing stuff out. So most people listen. One person didn't, and like drank it every 2 hours.
Oh, geez.
Drank it all day long, then charged it overnight and did that. And then she called and I know her, and she wanted to know if the unit was making her sick. And I said, no, you're making yourself sick by abusing it. But, if you want to fight through a harder detox, kind of like you did with the fasting.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think that's the most effective way is to beat up your body, though.
No, I don't think so either. The body, it's smart, and if you're having these horrible detox symptoms, you're probably going too fast and you're probably just forcing it to do too much at once. And the system is just like, all right, we're getting sick. Too bad. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. I could tell from when we talked before the cast went live that you had a very deep experience and were very intuitive about it and resolving it.
Yeah.
And I'm engineering guy, so I'm measuring everything, and then one day I hear this voice that just keeps saying, stop measuring,
Yeah.
stop measuring yourself,
Yeah.
start using your senses.
Yeah.
And I really departed from anything conventional there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always nice, as if you're sharing the scale, to have like some measurements or proof or fact.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I can tell when my pH is too low or too high in my body. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's like, okay,
definitely.
I'll move it up a little bit because I got off balance.
Yeah.
But I'm not like measuring, especially with diabetics. They're always poking themselves, worried
Yeah,
about their blood sugar. And I
exactly.
would tell them, don't worry about it. But you'll know when it's way too high, and you'll know when it's
Exactly.
too low.
Yeah.
And low will get you wasted. So you get the body working right. And if you're taking insulin, you'll be pushing low all the time. And that's like a death sentence.
Oh yeah,
High blood
definitely.
sugar, can't do it for too long, but don't worry about it. Your
Yeah.
doctor is going to tell you, oh, you shot up to 400. It was like, I would do things for people where I'm like, they were like, how are you eating that? And I'm like, well, it's, yeah, I thought you couldn't eat sugar. I'm like, no, fruit's good for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I could push my blood sugar up to 1,000. It wouldn't affect my vision, wouldn't affect my balance, nothing. Right. And
Yeah.
then the body has learned how to operate that way. And then you
Yeah.
have to lower it down slowly. Right. But
Yeah.
if it's stuck at 1,000 for a week, you're going to start burning
That's a
up.
problem. Yeah.
The
That's a
problem,
big problem.
right? If you're
Yeah.
still eating donuts,
Yeah.
if you're still
Probably
feeding the
shouldn't do
kid,
that.
yeah. And I see it all the time. I
Yeah.
watch people eat and I'm like, oh, you're feeding candida.
Yeah.
Good luck
Oh
getting rid
yeah.
of that.
Most people, I mean, most people are not, my audience is a little more keen on this stuff, but a lot of people, it's just like, cereal for breakfast and just all the highly processed foods with the seed oils, just chock full of deuterium, and, wondering why they feel bad. Well, I'm eating healthy whole grains. And I'm like, that's not healthy. It's not
Yeah.
it's not real food. If it doesn't grow out of the ground, or have a mother, it's probably not something you really want to be eating a ton of,
Well, I mean, in the end is, if you eat whole foods grown in a mineral rich soil,
Yes.
living, which means
Yes.
low nitrogen, because nitrogen ties up oxygen all the time. So there's the problem. Like when you see high nitrogen grow, one angle of it is you see a dying flora and fauna in the subsystem. And because it ties up the oxygen, screws up the whole trade system of the roots and the sugar exchange and the CO2 and that whole life cycle, right?
Yeah.
So exercise, and then good water. So whole foods, exercise, good water.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed in the human record. If you do that, you will recover from some of the worst stuff. I'm talking like bad stuff, like days to live. I know a lot of people who have had days to live, said, sign your life off, and they just didn't give up. And, somebody fed them some good mineral water and they started feeling better within 24 hours. And then they go, hey, I want to get up and walk around. And then they go, let me out of this place.
Yeah.
And they're alive, enjoying life today.
That's amazing.
And it's not like one or two, it's hundreds of people. And
wow.
so, and they exercise, like even at 85, they walk almost every day. Yeah. And they drink good mineral water and they eat whole foods, and they even enjoy a cake or a beer or wine, every now and then. And it has no effect on them at 85. They can enjoy things when done in moderation,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So the 90% rule, I call it,
Yeah.
90% of the time you can pull that off. It's going to be okay to break the rules every now and then.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, the further away from nature that we get, the sicker that we get. So I feel like if you're really connected to the earth, you're doing all the right things, grounding, getting sunlight, circadian rhythms, you're building your redox function, right? That flow of electrons in your body is so much higher. And so if you want to have a piece of cake, not telling anyone to go do this, but if you want to do, your body knows what to do with it, right?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not going to cause a freaking combustion.
Usually just throws most of it away because it don't need it, is what it comes down to, till you build the gut bacteria and that want it.
Exactly. Right? Then you got to have it all the time and you're obsessed with it. So that's the line you got to walk. You don't want to be feeding those bugs.
Right. It's a weird addiction. Like when you go there, I used to rip on people because I was very physically active all day long and I didn't eat a lot of calories. When I was a hunting and fishing guide for 5 years, and I would literally calculate the calories
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is impossible. Like, so the caloric thing's like a bunch of
Oh, it's
BS.
crap. Yeah.
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 One
Yeah.
of my teachers, we were just talking about, we're really only supposed to derive like 1/3 of our energy from food. The other 2/3 is the sunlight and the grounding, and the easy water that our body makes. That's our body battery. That's the energy we have. So if you're truly like hunting, fishing, out there connected to the earth, under the sun, getting infrared and UV light, you don't need to eat 2,000 calories a day. Like
No, not at
your
all.
body doesn't require that energy because you're getting the natural energy source. I mean, how the hell did we evolve?
That was the question I asked. Cause I
Yeah.
calculated it out, and the first hunting outfit I used to work for, and I hunted really hard because it was my like junior years of it. So I would
Yeah.
cover like 30, 40 miles in a day with the backpack on almost every day. And I ate less and less and less.
Yeah.
And the rotten food, like they would make like white bread sandwiches with that yellow Kraft cheese on it
Oh
with a
God.
bunch of nitrate meat, right?
Yeah.
And whatever else, a bag of Tostitos or Doritos or whatever. And I got to the point where it was making me sick
Oh
when
yeah,
I
I
would eat
bet.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the healthier I got, it was hunting season came on. I was burning all these calories. Like I was not able to eat the junk food.
Yeah.
So my calories went down further. And I'm like, I'm still 175 pounds. I started at 180. I lost 5 pounds in all this. And like, it's a good 5 pound loss,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm like, wow, this calorie thing's a bunch of BS. Cause I used to be a
Yeah.
hiker before that. And then you go detox when you get up in nature,
Oh
pass out
yeah.
on the ground because you're exhausted, not of
Yeah.
shape, your first hike. And I would eat like berries, raspberries growing in the woods. And like, I'm like, I don't even need to eat this other food. And what's
Yeah.
going on here, but I would always pack the calories. I'm going to do 10 miles a day uphill. I got to eat X amount of calories. And in the end, no, that wasn't
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's so much in nature, like just we do derive so much energy from the sunlight. That's why when I coach people, because that's part of what I do is coaching people, I used to just strictly coach nutrition, and like, let's look at your macros, your fat and your protein and blah, blah, blah. And now I'm like, are you getting sunlight? Are you seeing sunrise? Are you doing this? And they're like, why? I'm like, because if you do these things, it's a natural appetite suppressant. Your appetite's going to self-correct. And if you want to lose weight, if you're doing all this stuff, it's not going to be this thing where you have to sit there with a calculator and type in, I had 15, grams of fat and 30 grams of protein at this meal. And then I had to have another one 2 hours later. I'm like, no, throw that away. Throw that mindset away. Like
Yeah.
we have to understand, the water is a part of that too. Like you can't just go to the store and get crappy bottled water and be chugging that all day. Like that's another part of the equation. You got to have a good water source too as part of that.
It's part of the communication network of all the
Yes.
living. So
Yes.
in a way, it's like a mycelium network. Like it's why if you plow the soil, then the plants can't communicate. So if you plow your water, basically your organs can't communicate as well.
Wow.
So, and they short circuit, they burn out. That's what dehydration is.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so the liver is kind of the brain of the lower organs, governs a lot of what goes on and takes the role. That's why you can remove organs, is because the liver will just fire up and start doing what that organ used to do a lot of times.
Yeah.
And the brain, the mental health, your attitude, right? Never give up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't beat
that
yourself
was
up.
a big part of my healing journey is I think that was like the last piece for me. Should have been one of the first, but it was the last piece for me of, a lot of my audience knows just wanting to get pregnant. I had to envision that. I had to see that, imagine it as though it had already happened. And then I had to be happy for other people that were getting pregnant when I wasn't, like, because there's a whole thing, you see somebody getting something that you want. And sometimes human nature can be like jealousy or like feeling bad or less than. And so I had to like shift that. And anytime that would happen for a friend of mine, it's like, let me buy them a gift. Let me do something kind for them and tell them how happy I am for them and actually genuinely be happy for that person.
Right.
You have to have that mental shift where you are like in gratitude and in love. And if you're not in that space, you're energetically blocking that thing that you're trying to get to. And it's
when we want to heal, we have to imagine ourselves well. We have to envision that as well, you know?
I think that's probably the most important point.
Yeah.
And we do see water response. So like
Yes.
in instantaneous healings, a lot of that might have to do with the water going, oh, we're in a state of love now,
Yes.
acceptance. And we've let go of all the things that we can't control or can't write ourselves. Right. And then all of a sudden just people feel better like right away. What happened?
Yeah.
It's the whole energy field, went to the more natural state.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, Dispenza is doing that at his, his retreats or conferences, having these people in a state of coherence and people having spontaneous healings. And it's like, oh, that's impossible. But no, I mean, think about all that energy. We're like Wi-Fi routers, I always say, and we get this positive vibration going and spread that heart coherence. And I mean, miracles can happen because it's the water network in my body communicating with theirs. And it's just, I mean, it's magical, but it's real. I mean, it's just as real as looking at something under a microscope.
Even more real sometimes because, I've done some ayahuasca ceremonies, and the first one, the whatever, however it works, doesn't matter to me. But the information was basically feeling is reality. And I lost all my senses one by one and then lost them all together, but I could still feel. And they were like, you see, you're sensing things in the room. You're all just by feeling that. So the senses were superficial illusions to what the soul feels. And I 100% was convinced.
Yeah.
But as a guy, if you would have told me feeling is reality, I would have been like, feelings, you don't need them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's how most people work. And then you get to that place where you're like, I'm doing everything. I'm trying everything. This is just that final piece. I have to remove that blockage. I have to get there in order to actually heal. That's got to be a piece.
And you got to have compassion for the person, because like letting go of, like, if you feel like you've been wronged by another human being, like that's very close, human being to human being. It's as close as you can get. So if you feel like you've been wronged, you have to let go of that and realize it was just part of the learning process, and that my healing crisis was just loaded with like 8 things that were like abominable all at once. And I'm like, figures, the universe is just going to give me this all at once, because this is how I learn. Otherwise I don't,
Yeah, I get it.
Get my attention. And in the end, it was same thing that you're saying. You have to let go and get into this state of emotional state of being thankful and grateful, and not fighting it. And anger, I know, like smokes the liver like bad. And I was angry about a lot of things because I'm like, I did all the right things and I was wronged by all these other people, and I never screwed them. I was honest, but in the end, they're just screwing me. And it's easy to be angry at other human beings, right? Or institutions.
Very much so. Yeah.
Now you have weird times in the world where everybody's really angry at the financial system and the vaccines, and they're angry at all this. And I go to these seminars, with all these people, experts, right? And they're just telling you 90 ways to Sunday how the graphene oxide and the robots in your body, and you're being controlled with nanoparticles, and this is going to do that, and you're all going to die, and half of the population is going to die, and the Illuminati, and I'm like, this is just all like fear mongering, negative stuff. And I'm like, who are these guys working for, or these people? And they just bought right into the whole black magic of, program you into thinking you don't have a chance.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I gotta get away from all this stuff and focus on the adaptability and nature of that. We're part of it. Right.
Agree.
And the good stuff. So really a pleasure to have a similar approach, because I think it's the only one that really works.
I think so too. And I think if we live in this state of fear, there's a lot of things going on in the world that I definitely disagree with, but I just choose not to put myself into that energy. And people get mad. Why don't you talk about this on your platform? Why don't you talk about this on your platform? And I'm like, why don't you start your own platform and you talk about it? Because
you're going to feed it, right?
I'm
even down to the deuterium. I don't like that one, because it's like, it's not all true. It's not all false, but it's based on this idea that you're ingesting bad stuff.
Yeah.
in the end.
Well, the
you
body
know,
can deal with deuterium if you put it in its natural state. I mean, UV light depletes it, cold depletes it, heat,
well,
all it can,
I'll, I'll give you a simple that's from atomics. So you got a proton and then you double it and it makes a hydrogen, diatomic hydrogen, right? And it's already violated the first law we hear about is opposites attract, right?
Mhm.
So we're starting the atomic journey. Let's start with one, a proton, two protons, like charges. Okay, that doesn't make sense with opposites attract. And then now we have a doubling again, like cellular division, right?
Mhm.
And now you have helium, except two of them flip into neutrons and two of them are protons. It's all the same thing. They're just
Right.
particles. And then three heliums get together and make a carbon. And you have kind of the initial musical chain, right? So three gases, inert gases that are all over in the air can under integration or implosion in the right way, can get together to form carbon now. And this keeps going on. Water actually in its high structure state is simulating carbon.
Mm.
And that's how it's going to start to make proteins or carbohydrates or whatever it needs to do to drive life, and without the side effects, right? So now, a little tidbit, the direction that the pole is heading, like we talk about plus or minus or north or south, or
Yep.
the direction that is heading is way more important than what it is. So a positive charge heading back to a null charge is gaining energy and gaining structure. Same thing with the negative charge, heading back towards the null point or zero or the ground. So you put the human being on the ground, it starts heading away from its overcharged condition that could be plus or minus, right?
Mhm.
So the water and you know which direction you're heading. It's not about the absolute value or whether it's grounded or not. It's which direction, this charge is heading. Is it saturating, overfilling, or is it desaturating and combining with some sort of what we would call structure that's useful, that's natural? How have we identified this? So deuterium, right? So if hydrogen goes to make the leap to helium, which is next on its goal, right? And that's the natural common helium, hydrogen, very common. And it doesn't make that leap because it isn't surrounded by the support system. It gets stuck at H3. And there's a bunch of different forms of H3. And if it's H3 on the rise, where it's just couldn't quite make it, but it's still going, it's still going to get to helium, and it needs to absorb a proton or a neutron and be in the right state to flip that. Then it becomes helium, right? And then if it's in the waters in a bad state, it'll influence the drop. And what we say about deuterium is it's kind of stuck like a chronic illness. The water's stuck, and so is the deuterium. So you evaporate it, you recondense it over and over again, the deuterium levels drop. What do you think nature's doing? What do you think happens when we short cycle water? So in my opinion, deuterium isn't a mechanical thing that got in the water. It's a state of evolution in all of matter that is more primal and influenced in the water. And so you either have stuck deuterium, decaying deuterium back to hydrogen, or ascending deuterium up to helium. And that takes an environmental input to decide what's going to happen there. And so if your body or your water is stuck, you got to do something to knock it off its stasis. That is not where you want it to be. Right. It's just like you have trouble maintaining health doing the same routine over and over again.
Yes,
Stay
exactly.
Healthy, you need diversity.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
that's my kind of take on the atomic table. Is nothing more than circles putting themselves together. And as you get to the bloated end, you have active protons that are packing a bunch of neutrons, which I say is just like the population. And it's a role, it's a character role. Like this life, I am going to chill and have a drink by the beach, have my Mai Tai, and I'm not getting involved in all this. That's not my journey this time. But another journey, it might be like, hey, I worked my nuts off last time around. And this life, I'm just going to be a normal Joe and chill and not do all this crazy stuff that I did last life. So it's not judgmental, but when you get to the upper end of the table, everything becomes unstable because a small amount are doing the work and everybody else is just kind of laying around, not doing a whole lot. Right.
Yep. Absolutely.
And so a lot of this is engaging and empowering human beings to intuitively and artistically, creatively activate yourself to better yourself, and don't let anybody judge you. There's a lot of ways to do this,
Yeah,
you know,
I
and
agree.
if somebody's struggling really bad and they won't give anything up, I'm kind of like, well, that's your choice. You know what I mean? It's okay.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
when it's your time, it's your time. Like,
When you're
totally cool
ready.
with people who want to eat steak and drink all the way out the door and don't want to make that's your business. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But we all know there's probably limits to all of it. So
Yeah, there's limits to everything for sure. 100%.
yeah.
Cool. Well, this has been, I feel like we could keep
Yeah,
talking for another hour at least. But I guess we should probably wrap pretty soon.
Sure.
Where can people find you and kind of learn more about your company and what you do if they wanted to?
Okay. Naturalaction.com or naturalactionwater.com. And like I said, we have a member site that's got a lot of back end. We don't put it on the front end because it's just too distracting. But if you really want to dive in and start learning, and then we do webinars. I'll
cool.
interview. We've kind of taken a break a little bit during this transition, but we're about to get back to doing some, which are intended to be educational. So a lot of them have pictures. We show pictures of these different states and measuring UV spec and discussing, what's the future for water as science uncovers more. And we'll start to go back into that, I think, more layman's terms. I wanted to set the foundation with more hardcore science. Back, starting in about 1817, we started really laying down a recording of it. So we maintained clear through all the marketing language difficulty. So yeah, those are about the channels. And other than that, that's the outward face. We're really, how do we put it? We interrelate with customer service with customers. So there's no like dial up and get a message. So if anybody has any questions or needs to know anything, our chat box runs like 16 hours a day. So there's a lot of ways to interface and remove some of the confusion of what goes on there. And really appreciate the opportunity to share and very inspired by how you were able to move through, and certainly wish you the best of luck and with the pregnancy.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're doing an amazing thing.
I appreciate it. And thank you for coming on and educating my audience. I love that we could hopefully make some of this information a little more accessible to them. It can be complicated when you kind of try to figure it out yourself. So I appreciate your time. Yeah.
Yeah. And if there's visuals, a lot of times it's a lot better. Words
Definitely
are a little bit rough. And I'll leave you with this is, so there's a hormone in the body that's produced by an actinomyces. And this relates to pregnancy and cancer. And so for the first 9 weeks, the human seed, fertilized seed, is exactly the same as cancer.
Wow.
Jerry Tennant talks about this also. Healing is voltage. So the electrical kind of Tesla view of healing, which is what I kind of take to. At any rate, at week 9, the pancreas forms, and then you can see human distinct features, and you can see a nucleus in the cells. So for 9 weeks, there's a hormone. I'll just call it the CG hormone. And it's what tells the immune system not to attack the fetus.
Interesting.
Now, if you're a male and you have cancer and you take a pregnancy test, guess what?
High HCG levels.
Yeah. Now,
interesting.
There's no DNA in the equation yet. So the human fetus is surrounded by water inside a human being. So in my opinion, water is what sets up the DNA to form life.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah. I wanted to leave with that. And it's a good inroad to understand cancer and what it really is and what it really isn't.
Wow.
So
that's fascinating.
Yeah. All made possible by the human pregnancy. It's a great example of water and life formation and this so-called cancer thing.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you.